All right, folks. Once again, I welcome you. We welcome you here at Wildlife for You. We're here for another class, and we're going to be focusing on predators again. Predators are kind of a big part of Wildlife for You because they're often misunderstood, and we love teaching folks about predators. So today's class is actually part one of a two-part series. We're going to be talking about how predators kind of take down their prey. That's what today's class is. And then the next class 2 weeks from now is going to be how predators consume their prey. And by learning about the takedown and how they enjoy their meal, you can then become really good at determining what predators have passed before you. If you come across a carcass or anything, just the visual signs that you find on that carcass can give you a good idea of what type of predator may have taken down that animal. I promise not to get too gory. We are going to show some slides here that it's just going to show nature, and nature's not always pretty sometimes, but just fair warning there. So again, welcome to everyone. Today's presentation is called The Takedown. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to try teaching you, getting you to understand more about predator behavior. Now we have two presenters today. I will be doing most of the talk. My name's Daryl Radijak. We also have Stephanie Payne joining us. Most of you know her. We're both wildlife biologists, and we pretty much focus a lot on large carnivores. But for the new folks on here that have never attended the class before, I do want to let you know that the information you receive here is good, sound scientific information. We do have a lot of wildlife experience, so it's not just because we stayed in a Holiday Inn. I do have a degree in environmental and forest biology way back 1992. I've been a wildlife biologist for almost 30 years now. I managed a bear center in Tennessee. I was a statewide coordinator for bear, deer, and elk in Tennessee, as well as the chief of wildlife. And now for the last 6 years, I've been doing a lot of my wildlife biology stuff with these large animals here in the western half of the United States. So I've got over 25 years experience doing that. And I'll turn it over to my co-host, Stephanie, just to say a little bit about herself.
Sure. So also a wildlife biologist, and I specialized in human and wildlife dynamics. So the primary specialization there, it was unique. We actually created it, but it focuses not just on the wildlife biology aspects of a general wildlife biologist, but a lot of economy and social sciences things, because at the end of the day, human conflict always has the word human in it, and a lot of times the humans could act more thoughtfully to maybe keep things from happening, but just how do we reduce that conflict? I'm also a coordinator for the Human Wildlife Attack Response Training. It's an international training that we do with partners in Canada, and we actually train organizations, whether it's federal, state, or provincial, and how to respond to potentially fatal, but severe or fatal wildlife human incidents. Daryl has on here, I've been a backpacker for life, also just an avid outdoorsman. I'm outdoors for pretty much everything, whether it's, I joke that there's two seasons, there's hunting season and there's fishing season, but all seasons are outdoor seasons. So absolutely passionate about this and very much in the human wildlife dynamic space. So.
All right, thanks, Steph. Okay, let's jump into today's discussion. And I'm going to start here with a very basic question about why do we even study predator attacks? Now, for someone like myself or Stephanie, there's the nerd in us that just loves to learn about wildlife. And obviously we can research predators as much as we possibly can. And many folks do. There's a lot of biologists I know that are actually studying predators and different behavioral characteristics of whenever a predator attacks. But I imagine most folks on this presentation aren't really to that level. But there's typically a part of you that is really concerned about predator attacks. One of the reasons could be because you yourself own livestock, or you know someone who has livestock. And when I'm talking about livestock, yes, you see a picture here of cattle, but livestock could be anything from chickens to goats to sheep to any of those farm animals you might keep in your backyard, back 40, wherever you keep those. And those animals are sometimes susceptible to predator attacks. if you don't have livestock or know anyone with livestock, I imagine most folks on this call probably have a pet, whether or not it's a cat or a dog, or at least know someone that has a pet. And unfortunately, you know that sometimes pets can even fall prey to a predator. So it's really good as just a novel citizen to know about wildlife and to know about what wildlife is out there and what they're capable of doing. So studying predators is definitely something we promote. And I'll say it over and over again, the more you know about wildlife, the better it is for not only you, but for the wildlife themselves. So one of the things I want everyone to do, though, is as we're getting into this, I want everyone to remember that there is no such thing as good or bad animals. Sadly, the media, whether or not it is Disney or nature documentaries or newspapers or radios, they tend to paint animals in this good or bad light. And so they assign these human characteristics to animals. And the thing is, animals don't know right or wrong. They just know how to survive. And when it comes to predation, believe it or not, predation has been occurring on this earth for almost 400 million years. That's a huge time period. When you think of the dinosaurs, we all know like T-Rex was a predator of other dinosaurs. That was occurring 60 million years ago. So predation predates the dinosaurs by a long, long time. So it's a completely natural process. And so these animals aren't good animals or bad animals. They are just animals. And when you think of predation, a lot of people think big, scary animals. But look at this bird, beautiful bird. If you know your birds, I'm sure someone will guess this, but I'll call it out now. That is a shrike, gorgeous songbird, so to speak. Beautiful looking bird. You wouldn't think of that animal being some fierce looking predator, but believe it or not, that animal has a nickname of being the impaler, like Vlad the Impaler. It acts as a predator and it does some crazy things with the prey that it finds. And assigning good and bad just does not feel appropriate in pretty much all situations when you're dealing with wildlife. And so I just want everyone to understand, predators are just a natural type of animal. And they're not good or bad. They're simply being the animals that they evolved to be. They just simply eat other animals. And you can see from these pictures, even predators can be gosh darn cute. So with that, what we're going to do today is we're going to examine this classifications of predators. And we're going to focus primarily on three different families or three different groups of predators. Now, there are a whole bunch of other predators, but we're going to focus on the largest predators here in North America. So we're not going to be talking about the mesopredators like the weasels and the raccoons and the foxes or anything like that. We might mention a fox here and there. But for the most part, we're going to be talking about these three different kinds of animals, or these three different families. Now, this first family we'll talk about are what we call the canids. They belong to the family Canidae. And so most of you know what the canids are. The other group we're going to be talking about are the ursids that belong to the family Ursidae. And the last family are going to be the felids, or the family Felidae. And so we more affectionately know these three groups of animals as the dogs, the bears, and the cats. Now, here's the thing. These are the largest predators in North America. We're going to focus on those because these are the ones that make the news, that make the stories of whenever you hear people talking about predators, it's usually attributed to one of these family groups. And the thing is, with each one of these groups, they all take down their prey differently, or they all secure their prey differently. Now, for this particular presentation, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be obviously talking about prey, but in this situation, we're primarily going to be talking about large prey. And so I mentioned the livestock before, or your family pet. Those those are a rarity for when these predators take animals down. They don't feed on those primarily. Yes, you could have a situation where a pet or one of your livestock gets killed, but these animals feed primarily on larger prey items of the natural world. I'm talking about mule deer, elk, bighorn sheep, moose, bison, a whole slew of these large prey items that these predators are very, very capable of taking those animals down. So before we get started here, we gotta think about how these animals, these predators, can take these large prey items down. So I want you to close your eyes. And that's my best rendition of what it's like when you close your eyes, the black screen there, but without closing your eyes. So what I want you to do is put yourself in the seat of, or in the position of being a predator, one of those large predators. Doesn't matter if it's a cat, bear, dog, whatever it is, and you are trying to secure your food. And say your food item that you're trying to secure is this thing right here. Huge animal. It's an elk. It's an American elk. And so these things can be upwards 500 to 700 pounds. They're really big animals, but that's what you plan on eating. Now, as a predator, you have pretty much one tool, or one quote unquote weapon, to take down that animal. And that is your teeth. Now, obviously, these are big, scary looking teeth, but they'll do this demonstration well, because the teeth of a predator is pretty much the primary tool that they use to take down that elk. Now, if they had jaws that big, that elk would not be that formidable. But here's the thing, folks. Doesn't matter if it's a bear, a cougar, a wolf, anything. Their jaws are relatively small in comparison to the prey item that they're trying to take down, whether or not it's an elk or a deer or a bison or a moose or anything like that. And so, because these predators have to take down these large animals, they have to develop specialized tactics in order to secure their food. They've got to, two of those, the cats and the dogs, they're true carnivores. They have to eat meat to survive. The bear is an omnivore. I'll go into that a little bit more. But they need these specialized tactics in order to secure their food. But here's a real important thing that people don't realize is the way they secure their food. They have to employ these tactics to really reduce the likelihood of injury, because a kick to the mouth where they knock out their teeth, or they get stepped on, break their spine, broken leg, any severe injury to that predator, and there's a good chance that predator is not going to survive. And so the way they take down their prey is really, really important, because not only does it have to secure that food source, but it has to keep them healthy. Because like I said, the wrong move, and with a predator that might weigh 80 to 150 pounds trying to take on an elk or a moose that is 4 times the size, it can easily do damage to that predator. So the takedown is extremely important for that predator out there. So what we're going to do, we're going to jump right into it, and we're going to start with that first family, and we're going to talk about the canids. And I'll stop briefly after each one of these families to see if there's any questions. So when we're talking about the canids, now there's a couple of different groups of canids that live in North America. Now, many people are familiar with these smaller-ish canids. We have a coyote there, as well as a family of foxes. But the thing to remember here, folks, these smaller canids, they typically feed on smaller prey. And so they're eating rabbits, mice, woodchucks, squirrels. That's their primary diet. That's what they feed on. Obviously, coyotes especially, they will feed on fawns, because those are smaller prey. So they will oftentimes feed on fawns. Sometimes they will go after maybe some weak individuals, like adult female deer. They might go after those. that's a rarity. That does not happen all too often, but so many people believe coyotes are just like targeting these adult deer and elk and things like that, and they're just too small. A large coyote is only about 30 pounds. And so primarily they're feeding on the smaller prey items. So when we're talking in this particular presentation, when we're talking about the canids, we're going to be talking about those larger canids. Primarily what we're going to be talking about are the gray wolves. Now, gray wolves, I'll show you later where gray wolves are found. They're found throughout a big chunk of North America. Having said that, when I say a big chunk of North America, we're talking mostly Canada and Alaska, but we do have about 3 distinct populations in the lower 48, and I'll show you where those are at. So gray wolves are the big canids that we're going to be talking about here. Now, we do have another species of wolf that some people believe appears in more places than it actually does. There is a red wolf species, but they're only down to about 16 animals left in the wild. And all of those animals are located on the coast of North Carolina. So not many red wolves, but the majority of wolves out there are what we call gray wolves. Now, there's another large canid on the landscape that, yes, does occur all over North America, and that is the domestic dog. Now, these are rather smallish, but you can see that they like to frolic and they like to play. The one looks very wolf-like, but the thing is, folks, these domestic dogs, they can grow up, not all breeds, but they can grow up to be some pretty fierce-looking canids. And when they turn feral or when they turn wild, they act very much like the gray wolves. They're only, how many years apart? 10,000 years evolution wise, like 17,000 years.
Yeah.
So they're very, very close to gray wolves. So lots of similar behavior characteristics when it comes to taking down prey. And yes, feral dogs will take down large prey items. So those are the 2 canids that we will be talking about. So when we dive into the canids and we try to look at their particular hunting strategy, the first thing you want to do is look at their lifestyle. How do those canids live? And for the most part, you all know this, they often live in packs. Gray wolves are notorious for having wolf packs. Feral dogs, when there's a bunch of feral dogs, they often run in packs. Coyotes, most of the time they're pretty solitary, but they can, especially if it's a family group, they can hunt in a pack. And so that pack is really, really important for their hunting strategy. Now, remember, I mentioned this before, but the canids are what we call true carnivores. They have to eat meat in order to survive. And so they depend on being able to take down that large animal to feed all the animals within their pack. So what they've done is, over time, they've developed a very awesome technique for taking down these large prey items. And so what wolves do, or what the canids do primarily, is their tactic for the most part is they're like these marathon runners. So when a wolf pack encounters a prey item that piques their interest, what they do is they begin to take chase. If they come upon a group of elk or deer or whatever, they'll try to single out that weakest, most vulnerable animal. And what they do is they begin to chase. And these animals can run a long, long time. Even physiologically, they are designed as marathon runners with the capacity of their lungs. They can just run and run and run. And what they do is they run these animals down. After they pick out the animal they're going after, they keep pursuing that animal. And it can go a long, long time. And obviously, if you are one of the prey items that is being pursued, it's a pretty harrowing event to be chased by all these wolves. Now, what they're trying to do, these wolves are simply trying to wear that animal down. A bison, or in this case, a moose that is that's ready to defend itself, is a very formidable creature. And so what they're trying to do is wear that animal down, tire it out, trying to get that animal to collapse. A lot of times these animals will, the prey item will run to water, trying to seek safety in water, or sometimes they'll find themselves, they get themselves into a bad, deep snow situation. And once that happens and the prey item is completely exhausted, that is when the wolves can move in to make the kill. And you can see with running that animal, even with this picture here, they're completely zapping the energy from those larger prey items. And so this poor elk is gasping for breath as it runs. And so that is one of the primary strategies. These wolves are going to try to wear that elk down. So once they wear that animal down, they then move in for the quote unquote kill. And they deliver their bites to a very specific area. Now, what canids typically do, and throughout this whole talk, we're going to be telling you the patterns we see. It is not 100% every time, but in most situations, the bite delivery that we're going to be talking about, the strategies, is what they do most of the time. There's obviously exceptions that occur to the rule. But whenever the wolves do move in for the kill, their bite delivery is usually to that hind end, the posterior side of the animal. Now, remember, they're going after some big, large prey items. And when that moose is defending itself, those front legs can snap a wolf's neck with one swift kick or knock out all its teeth. And that's doom. That's the death of that wolf. So oftentimes what they do is they will have a wolf in front of that animal kind of to distract it and keep that animal busy, while the other wolves circle from behind and try to get at that posterior, the back end of that animal. And they start delivering some terrible bites. They will bite at the leg, they will bite at the back end, they will go up underneath into the gut area, and they're delivering these lethal bites to the prey item. And you've heard the term like death by 1,000 cuts. Sadly, that's how a lot of the canids will deliver that killing blow, is that they're constantly nipping at the back end of these large prey items. And so remember, this animal is typically exhausted from a long pursuit, and then they're getting these multiple bites from the backside as they're being distracted by the front side. And before too long, they bleed out, they really lose strength, they fall to the ground. And as soon as that animal falls to the ground, that's when the whole pack jumps in. And so remember the goal here, the wolves are not being bad. The wolves are being what wolves are. They're trying to secure their food. And what they're trying to do is just secure the bloodline, the safety, the life of themselves, as well as the rest of the pack. So does anyone have any questions? I'll just do one or two questions at the end of each of these families. Or Stephanie, anything you want to chime in?
Yeah, so two things actually. So the first thing, and it may end up being three, but the two that I'm remembering, so I didn't want to interrupt you, is Daryl mentioned that feral dogs can often group together, and they do take on that pack mentality. I want to make very, very clear that if you get a group of neighborhood dogs that are truly domestic dogs during the evening when their humans are home, they're back at home with their family and enjoying the world. If they pack together during the day, they are prone to falling into these evolutionary behaviors, because that is their instinct. So you get 4 or 5 dogs together, and I'm all sizes. The local air quotes pack that we have has a lab, a Great Pyrenees mix, and then 2 like little dogs that run with them. And you get the 4 of them together, and they take on a pack mentality, and they will literally chase deer and do their best to be the wild dogs that are still, wild in their hearts at least, and they can do some damage, including to livestock as well when they feel like it. But the second thing to remember is, like Daryl said, these animals are going to pick out the weaker members if they can. They're not going to go after that robust, super healthy, like the elk that Daryl had on our original screen whenever we had our eyes closed, and then the elk showed up. That was a robust, live, health, peak of its days kind of animal. that's generally not going to be the one that they're going to go for, because that's going to be the most potential danger for themselves to take on. So it puts it at the highest risk. So we have to remember, the reason why Daryl said these are the common tried and true practices that we see most often is because they work. For thousands of years, this tactic for this species has worked with a high degree of efficiency, a high degree of effectiveness, and the highest amount of success while keeping that predator safe. And that is, like Daryl said, that's key, because if a predator loses just a couple teeth, between first the potential for infection, but also then the lack of that tool that the animal has, it truly does put a huge stress on that animal period. And then their ability to survive and thrive drastically decreases. So I think that was the only two things I wanted to mention, Daryl.
Okay. That was awesome. Thank you for that input. I don't see any questions, which is good. We'll be here. I'll be here all night to answer questions. So I'm going to keep going and jump into the next group or the next family of predators. And so what we'll jump into are what we call the felids. And very much like the canids, North America does have some of the smaller felids. And so you see two cats there. The one on the left is what we call a bobcat, Lynx rufus. The one on the right is it's like the bobcat on steroids. It's the northern cousin of the bobcat. That is a lynx. One of the big differences, if you look at the paws of the lynx, they're more well adapted to snow cover. One of their primary food items is a snowshoe hare. But for the most part, these smaller felids felines are feeding on what you see there, whether or not they're ground squirrels, snowshoe hares, mice, voles, things like that. Again, just like the coyote, a bobcat or a lynx will take a fawn if they stumble upon it, because a fawn is a relatively small prey item. Rarely do they ever take on adult deer unless that deer might be old or sick or wounded of some sort. And so for the most part, you don't see many attacks on these larger prey items from bobcats or from lynx. So what we'll be talking about, so those two animals typically feed on the smaller prey items. So what we will be talking about primarily today is North America's largest felid, and that is the cougar, otherwise known as the mountain lion. And this is one of the cats that gets blamed for so many things, but we're going to talk, there's very specific tactics that this creature uses when it is securing its prey items. And so again, very much like the canids, we're going to talk about the hunting strategy and their lifestyle, because that is going to dictate how they take down those larger prey items. So as opposed to the wolf, the cougar or the mountain lion, they live primarily a solitary existence. Those adult males, those adult females are primarily on their own hunting and living out their life. Obviously, there is one time, especially with the females, where they are with other cougars, and that's when the female has offspring. And so whenever you see pictures of multiple cougars together on the prowl, it's usually the mom with her cubs or kittens. And sometimes they'll stay with her a year and a half. And those cubs that she has can be quite large and almost indiscernible from the mom. But at that point in time, they're getting ready to go their separate ways. But for the most part, these cougars are solitary hunters. And again, very much like the canids or the wolves, they are true carnivores. They have to eat meat to survive. They have to hunt and secure the meat to survive. That's how they evolved. Now, they have evolved a much different technique than the wolves. The wolves were those pack animals, those marathon runners. Think of the cougar as being completely opposite. They are the ambush predator. They are what we would determine that 100-yard sprinter. So instead of running for miles and miles pursuing their prey item, they hide in a concealed location. And then when it gets close enough, they are in a mad sprint because they're trying to ambush and surprise their prey item. And when you look at these cougars, they're gorgeous animals. And it almost looks like a loaded gun with that thing ready to go off. And when they're in that position, they are ready to spring. That is the position that they're literally in their starting block. Like I said, the sprinters, they get down and they're ready to take off running at the highest speeds possible. And so what their goal is, these, again, they're solitary animals, so they don't have the luxury of having multiple partners that are going to distract the animal. So they can't be in a long battle with an animal. They got to kill it quickly. So they got to get onto that animal, surprise it, catch it off guard. And so when they do make that sprint, they're in an all-out run to get in good position so they do not cause harm to themselves. And I love that. This is my favorite photo. I think it's absolutely fantastic. But they are trying to pounce on their prey item in a position that is going to lead them to not getting injured and to putting that animal down quickly. Now, and I'll tell you how they do that. But the first thing I got to do, I've got to debunk a couple of things because I hear it over and over again from the general public. A couple of things going on here. First off, I will say I hear quite often that cougars will hide up in trees and ambush their prey items by jumping out of trees. That's typically not how they do that, because they're using that stealth, trying to hide and maneuver in position. And if they're up in a tree and their prey item kind of veers off course, they got to climb down from the tree and go. It just doesn't work like that. If they're up in a tree to begin with and a prey item walks by, that might happen, but the rarity is just unbelievable there. So they don't typically ambush their prey items from up in trees. I've got another tree story, but I'm going to say that until 2 weeks from today regarding cougars, but they don't typically ambush their prey items from up in trees. Another big thing, and I'm bringing this up because of this ambush strategy. You will often hear people talk about coyotes being an ambush predator. And that's not the case. Coyotes are those, they're in the canid family, so they do that pack mentality type. And you'll hear people say, oh, the coyotes will send one of their pack members in to lure a prey item into an ambush. And it may appear that way, but I'm telling you now, folks, coyotes are not that well developed that they plan their attacks, that they get together and say, hey, Paul's going to go in, we're going to hide over here. It doesn't happen like that. What they're typically seeing is whenever a coyote encounters a prey item, especially if it's a larger prey item, if they meet someone's dog or another some kind of pet, usually it's someone's dog, the coyote will engage in this behavior where it looks like play. And they're fooling around. What they're trying to do is they're trying to size up that dog to see if there's a weakness, if this is a potential meal that they could get. And so they're running around, almost looks like they're playing tag, but the coyote is really trying to discern whether or not this can be its next meal. And whenever that happens, a lot of times the dog will chase the coyote. And if that coyote belongs to a family of other coyotes or a pack, a lot of times that coyote will be running around, the dog chases it, and it runs into the other coyote members. And then as soon as that dog is outnumbered, that's when it spells usually trouble for that dog. But a lot of people believe this is like a planned behavior, and it's not. It's just their strategy. So enough about coyotes, back to the cougars here. So these felids, the cougar, the mountain lion, whatever you want to call it, is an ambush predator. It's by itself. It's trying to attack and dispatch of that large prey item as quickly as possible. And so their bite delivery completely different than that of the canids. If you look at the bite delivery, they're more anterior. They're more towards the head and the neck. Remember, they're trying to kill that animal as quickly as possible. And so again, I apologize for some of these pictures, but this is nature. So you can see this cougar here is going for the throat. There's two ways that the cat or the cougar will try to kill the animal quickly. In this photograph, it's trying to pinch off the trachea so the animal can't breathe. It will only last a few minutes if they can pinch off that trachea. Now, this is an amazing photo. It's a large cat here, but even this large cat might be 150 pounds taking on a 600 or 700 pound elk. Don't know if this elk was injured, but they typically don't go after the largest of the prey items. They'll try to get the weaker ones, but if that's the only prey item around, they have no problem. These cougars are masterful predators. And so you can see him grabbing on with its claws. The one thing I will tell you, cats are much more ambidextrous. And so they can use their claws a whole lot more than a dog can. And so obviously you see that cougar trying to get a good hold underneath that elk's chin to get a grasp of that trachea. The other place that they oftentimes go for is the back of the head. It's literally the base of the skull. If they could get in a position, they can deliver one crunch and literally kill that animal instantly. And that's obviously the best thing for both cat and prey item in that particular situation. But these cougars, again, when they are delivering their killing bite, they are going for the front of the animal, the head or the neck. They're trying to kill it as quickly as possible. And again, it's to secure their prey, but it's also to secure their safety, because if they get in a long drawn out battle with these animals, that cougar is likely to get hurt. And so once again, all that cougar is trying to do is secure a food source for itself or for its kittens, and they're just being what nature has designed them to be. Any questions about cougars before I move? Or Stephanie, let me see if you want to chime in.
No, I'm good with that, actually.
Oh, wow, I did good. Okay, so that was the felids. Let me get through this last one, and what we're going to talk about is this last group, the ursids. And when I say the ursids, we're primarily talking about the bears of North America. Now, we do have 3 species of bears in North America. We have black bears, brown bears, and polar bears. We don't really deal with polar bears too much down in the lower 48. So we'll primarily be talking about black bears and brown bears. And so, again, looking at the hunting strategy and the lifestyle of this animal, bears, for the most part, are kind of like cougars in that they have this mostly solitary existence. Adult male, adult female are pretty much always by themselves. Obviously, the big difference there is when they have offspring with them. That female black bear or female grizzly will have its offspring for a year and a half. Grizzlies sometimes keep their offspring up to 2.5 years. And so whenever you see a group of bears, that's usually the female and her offspring. And so for the most part, bears are solitary hunters. Now, what is much, much different with bears as opposed to the canines and the felines is that bears are not carnivores. They're omnivores. So they will eat both meat as well as vegetable material. Now, when we classify them as omnivores, we often say bears are opportunistic. They will eat whatever they find. And for the most part, finding grass or plants is a whole lot easier than finding some prey item that can run away from you. So as everyone knows, most of the bear's diet is going to be vegetable matter, but they will not hesitate to take advantage of meat. A lot of it is carrion or carcasses that they may stumble upon, but they will not hesitate to take down an animal if they have that opportunity. So because of that, if you look at the technique, again, they're omnivores. So they don't have to hunt in order to survive. And so their technique is completely different than the canines and the felines. And so I was trying to think of a good way to describe it. And I say they're opportunistic barroom brawlers. They're opportunistic in the fact that they'll be walking through the woods. They might not be hunting, but if they stumble upon a single cow elk or a fawn of some sort or any other type of prey item, they will take the opportunity to try to secure that prey item. Now, the barroom brawler is simply the way they kind of attack that animal. They kind of maul the thing, but you usually think of someone that's in that wrestling maul type of thing as being kind of slow and clumsy. Do not for a second believe bears are slow and clumsy. They can be extremely fast, can run at over 30 miles an hour, which is faster than Usain Bolt. And so you do have to be very, very mindful of bears, especially the brown bears, but they typically don't go out hunting for animals, but they won't hesitate to take advantage of an opportunity that presents itself. Now, again, they're very, very fast. They will pursue things. I hate that picture because it looks like the bear had that bison for a little bit already. But whenever they are presented an opportunity, like I said, they're not going to hesitate. They're going to try to jump on that animal and maul it if they can. So if you look at the way bears will attack the animal once they get it in their grasp, their bite delivery is kind of different than the canid, kind of different than the feline. What they do is they'll bite it wherever they can. You have to understand that those wolves and those cougars, they might weigh 80 to 120 pounds. Large cougar might be 150, 180 pound. So they're small-ish predators. Where you get a grizzly that weighs 400 pounds, sometimes even 600 pounds, they can literally maul that animal. So they grab that animal and they will bite it wherever they get a chance to bite it. And they're going to grab it with their claws and they're trying to get a hold of that animal. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but the way it happens most of the time with these larger predators, whether or not it's a bison or even an elk, is there's going to be a lot of bite marks to the back. That bear is just trying to get a hold, trying to wrestle that thing down, and they deliver a lot of those bites to the back of that animal, hopefully eventually working its way up to the head or wearing it out. But you see, the bear is simply just trying to get advantage, overwhelm that animal with its sheer size. And so they oftentimes deliver those bites to the back of the animal. Now, I know some of these pictures aren't the most pleasant to look at, but I will tell you, if there's a glimmer of hope, sometimes the prey fights back and they get in a boxing match with a bear, and sometimes they win, especially with the black bears. But for the most part, the bears are these barroom brawler type of predators. They're not actively hunting, but when they get that opportunity to jump on an animal, they're going to jump on an animal, and they're pretty formidable. Because the end game, once again, just like the wolves, just like the cougars, they're just trying to survive. They're just trying to eke out a living, and it's a really difficult, hard living. And so the bears develop their strategy for taking down an animal, and that's the way the bears do it. So let me summarize some of these tactics here, because I just spit out a whole bunch of stuff of 3 different families. So let's look at these, and we're going to talk about canids, felids, and ursids. So the wolves, the cougars, and the bears. And so that attack strategy. Remember, the wolves, they're the marathon runners. They're going to try to wear down their prey item. The cat, on the other hand, is that ambush predator. It's trying for a quick kill, usually to the back of the head or neck. The bear is that barroom brawler. It's just going to maul the thing if it gets its paws on the prey item. Now, what about bite location? Remember, the canids, they're going at the hind quarter. While another pack animal might distract it on the front end, it's the death by 1,000 cuts. They're biting at the back end, trying to get that animal to bleed out. That cougar, like I said, they're going after that head or neck. They're trying for that quick kill because they're usually by themselves and they're not a really big animal. So they got to deliver that crushing blow as quickly as they can. And the bear, because it's kind of just overwhelming the prey item with its size, will be delivering bites wherever it could get its mouth. So oftentimes that's the back of the animal, the hind end, eventually up to the neck to deliver that killing blow. So what about claw marks? I briefly mentioned it. You don't really see claw marks with with the canids, they don't really grasp their prey like the cats and the bears do. So claw marks are pretty rare with a canid attack. But the cougar or the feline attack, their claws, if you've ever seen them, they're beautiful. Obviously, they retract, but when they're in attack mode, those claws come out. They're really fine and sharp claws that these cats typically have. The bears, on the other hand, especially the grizzlies, the black bears tend to have sharp claws. The grizzlies, their claws are more designed for digging. So they're really blunt, and when they grasp onto a prey item, you're going to see a lot of tearing type of injuries. And let me mention something about claw marks, because I've got some experience with that. When it's a cat or when it's a bear, when an animal produces a claw mark, it is usually, think of their paw. It's that pad, and they've got 4 toes in the case of the cat, 5 toes in the case of the bear, and each one of those toes has a claw on the end. And when they grab an animal and they rake down, you're going to see a pattern of 4, potentially 5 if it's a bear, of these slices, kind of equally spread apart, but you'll see that they go in unison with the rest of its paw. You will not see slices on an animal or on a carcass where it's just scattered all over the place. Reason I'm bringing this up, you're not going to believe this, but when I was working in Tennessee, we actually had a gentleman call in, and he reported being attacked by a bear. And so our officers went to investigate, and he had cuts all over him, but they were kind of in the shape of that bottom right. They were just random, going back and forth all different directions. And we did a lengthy investigation, and he was not attacked by a bear. It was self-inflicted wounds, but claw marks have very distinctive patterns to them. And the way that they rip or the way that they tear is also distinctive of the type of predator it is. And so if you see those claw marks going every which way in all different directions, that's typically not caused by a predator. What about tracks? We were not going to talk about this. I sent everyone an old webinar that I did from a few years ago about animal tracking, but it's a great thing to brush up on. But if you find a carcass and you can find some clear tracks, obviously the canine track has those 4 toes, as opposed, well, the feline track also has 4 toes. The main difference, claw marks generally are seen in the canid track. You don't usually see claw marks in the track of a cougar. But one of the big differences is this main pad. The canine main pad has a single hump on it, while the feline pad has 2 humps. It almost forms like the letter M. I always say the best way to remember is M for meow. And so you'll know it's a cat track when you see that shape of that main pad. And then obviously the bear track is going to be a 5-toed track, much more oblong. But if you know what tracks to look like, obviously that's going to help you identify what type of animal had killed that prey item. Also, the thing to remember when it comes to finding tracks, because the canids are often pack animals, there's usually multiple sets of tracks, where with the cougar and with the bear, it's usually a single animal that's taken down that prey item. So, okay, feeding pattern. Once they take that animal down, how do they consume that animal? Well, that's what you're going to come back in 2 weeks to learn. That's what we're going to be talking about on March 15th. But hold off, there's really, really interesting stuff when we get to there. So, all right, I'm going to pause here. How are we doing?
We're doing good. We're doing good. But one thing I want to go back to on when you were talking about the claw marks that one can leave, and I don't want to make you go all the way back, but I would love if you did. So one of the things to note here is, number one, the jaggedness of the edges, because so your skin is very elastic, right? And every living thing's skin is very elastic. There's a lot of give and take. There's a lot of play in here. So when you take something sharp like a claw and you try to puncture into something, this is a great image, but a lot of times there's a lot of of ripping that occurs on the sides as well. It is not like um, those picture perfect things that you always see. Generally speaking, while they are going to be linear, you got a lot of play in your fingers. And if you put your fingers in something and you're trying to pull down and it's taking a lot of strength for you, sometimes you get a little deviation. But on the flip side, we often, I don't want to say often, we've sometimes received things where there's, some generally linear things, but the space between it is substantial. And you're sitting there thinking, there's no way that something could spread its claws that far. But they also leave distinctive shapes in tissues. For example, because the cat's claw is conical and it is very sharp and it's angled. When it goes in, it'll generally leave, if it's just a puncture, which a lot of times you'll see just a puncture, leaves kind of a distinctive teardrop shape. So there are other telltale things as well that we look for with claw marks. And cats are also prone to using their back claws if they are in a situation to gain additional purchase on something, or if they've got something down and I'm
gonna quiz them. I'm gonna quiz them.
Never mind. Daryl's talking now. Stephanie shuts it. Carry on, son.
Well, no, I'll let you reiterate what you're about to say and just hear a little in a little bit. Iman asked the question about how they consume their prey. Wonderful question, and like I said, we're going to get to that in the class on. It's called the meal, because these predators, how they take down the animal is usually very different, and there's telltale signs to look for. How they consume the animal is often very different, and there's telltale signs. We could spend 3 hours easily talking about it in one class, but we're dividing it up into, that's why it's a 2-part series. But I hope you can join us again, Iman, on the 15th, because that's what we're going to be talking about. So let me go forward, and what we're going to do, we're going to do a little quiz. And I will tell you right now, I was debating whether or not I'm going to show actual carcasses, and I refrained from doing that, but you're still going to learn a lot about identifying what you see in the field based on this quiz. So just testing your knowledge here regarding the way that predators take down the animals. So first question, we're going to be thinking about the length of pursuit. So when you find a carcass, and a lot of times you can look around, you can kind of see what has happened because of bushes or tracks in a snow or something. You can kind of get a gauge for the length of pursuit. So if we put that continuum on there and we have a short length of pursuit versus a long length, and this is really easy, folks. So that short length obviously is going to be that cougar, the feline. Remember, it's an ambush predator. It's waiting until that animal gets close. And the goal here is for that single cat, which can be small at times, to get in a position really quickly, surprise that prey item so they don't get injured, and they're able to dispatch that prey item really quickly. The longest length of pursuit, obviously, are those canids, the wolves. They will run an animal down, sometimes for miles, until that larger animal wears out and gives up. And so the length of pursuit is very, very different between the canids and the felids. The bears kind of fall in the middle there. They tend to be a short distance. They don't have capacity to chase an animal a long way, although you've probably seen some videos of bears pursuing an elk calf for a long way. So they're kind of somewhere in the middle. What they're trying to do is just get the animal down as quickly as possible. Now, the claw marks on the carcass, and Stephanie, you did an awesome job explaining it, but say you had two different claw marks to look at, and you see them evenly spaced, so you know there's some kind of predator. One set of claw marks is really, really thin, and one is much more, it's much wider, appears to be much duller with the way the claws are. I already gave it away. So that those thinner slices that you will see, again, there will be some jagged edges in there, but those thinner slices are going to be typically from that feline. It has, Stephanie, you don't have a cougar claw handy, do you?
No,
Okay.
I have a bear claw. Do you need me to get a bear claw?
Yeah, get it. Well, it's a black bear claw, so it'll be kind of the black bear.
Well, actually, it's probably more representative of
The cougar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they can do really thin. Again, there will be jagged tears, but if it's a grizzly, remember the grizzly claws are much more blunt, much longer claws. So you're going to see some really deep, wider gashes on that carcass from those two animals. Now, this is where Stephanie was getting into. So I am going to quiz you here. Here's where you can get your typing fingers ready. So what we're going to talk about here is the location of the bite wounds. And let me explain. I just talked about the claw marks. Claw marks are not how the animal typically kills its prey item. Yes, they will do damage. Yes, an animal could bleed quite extensively from the claws. The bite wound or the bite delivery is usually the death blow. That is what those predators are using to kill the animal. They're trying to bite it in a location that is going to cause that prey item to succumb. And so looking for the bite wounds, claw marks are easy. You'll see those long slices. Bite wounds are typically puncture wounds. Can you describe bite wounds a little more in depth?
Yeah. So when you're looking at, for example, I mean, being completely honest, most teeth are conical. They're all generally the canine teeth of bears, cougars, and wolves are all very, very similar in nature because that's a structural thing. That's how teeth have evolved to maintain their strength. But generally speaking, for example, when you're looking at a cat, it's not just their front canines that are really participating and helping them out. The teeth directly behind the canines are what we would say is like our premolars. They act as shears, quite literally. They have a very shearing action. And with cougars specifically, they're actually designed so that when they go for this area at the back of the neck, that shearing will actually go in and separate the vertebrae to then go down into the spinal cord. They're very, very specifically designed for that. And Daryl, next class, if you'd like, I'll bring in a couple skulls and we can really show that.
No, that would be great. Okay, so here's where I'm going to test you. I'm going to say you find a carcass. The carcass probably won't be standing like this deer is, but pretend that that deer is laying down right now, and you examine the carcass and you find the bite wounds. Remember, the bite wounds are going to be punctures. They're not going to be these long rips like the claws. The bite wounds will be punctures. So say you find a carcass and you find the bite wounds that are in those locations where I circled in red. What would be one of the predators that should come to your mind? Awesome. Very, very good. You guys.
Oh, look at Patricia. She went science language on us. Brownie points.
Yeah, brownie points there. Okay, yes, very good. A bear. Say you stumble upon that carcass, but this time you're finding the bite wounds in these locations. You see a bunch on the back hams, even on the underside of the front legs. Obviously, very good. It's pretty easy. The thing I love about learning about wildlife is if it's taught the right way or someone explains it to you, it becomes, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. So yes, that was a wolf or a canine, because that, remember, the death by 1,000 cuts. Then obviously the last one, you examine a carcass and you find the puncture wounds either on the head somewhere or right under that jaw. It's obviously going to be that feline, because they're trying to deliver that quick lethal blow as quickly as possible. So you guys were awesome. Those were really, really easy. Now I'm going to throw this at you. Say you come upon a carcass and it's a larger animal and you can't really find the bite marks, but you see these claw marks in these locations. You see it on the back and somewhere up on the neck. What would you suspect? Very, very good. Here's the thing, and Stephanie mentioned it can actually be one of two, because remember the bear is just trying to grab wherever it can, and it could leave claw marks wherever it grabs that animal. But Stephanie, you want to explain how sometimes they use their back legs?
Yeah, so a lot of times the back legs primarily they're used for purchase, so you got, if just picture yourself standing on top of a horse, for example, with no saddle or anything like that. There's a lot of movement and whatnot. So using those back claws to really kind of try to gain purchase and to continue keeping the leverage where their upper body requires that leverage to be is very much can be critical to their success. And then obviously the front claws are just generally used as a holding. They're not, like Daryl said, they're not out there using their claws to try to rip down the side of an animal and do damage that way, because that's not an effective takedown method. Their effective takedown method has everything to do with their teeth. So their claws are there to stabilize their body. If we're talking cats, their claws are there to stabilize their body, to position themselves to where they know that they can get an effective bite to then dispatch that animal. Now with bears, like Daryl said, they're more like the pugilists to the world. So they're just out there, they're not super graceful about it. They're just employing every tactic that they know how to get their body weight involved in the dispute.
Yeah. Excellent. Great description. And so when you do see those claw marks on the back end of the animal, like Stephanie said, that could very well be from a cat. It could very well be from its back claws, just trying to hold on, to stay in position to deliver that deadly bite to the back of the skull. So very, very good, guys. Okay, this is really important. I'm going to begin to wrap up. Again, huge part of knowing what animal has caused what fatality or is responsible for what is, you have to look, if you find a carcass, you have to look at the location of that carcass and know some things about the animals in that area. So when we're talking about gray wolves, and I mentioned this earlier before, they do occupy a large part of North America, but that large part is mostly in the northern part. Most of Canada, all of Alaska, believe it or not, that wolves occur throughout all those islands up north of there as well. I just didn't take time to fill those in. But you do see that in the lower 48, they will sweep down, these gray wolves will sweep down through that greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, now Colorado's got some wolves. Hopefully Utah will be really, really close to getting wolves. And then you have
Daryl, is that pocket in red down at the bottom, is that the Mexican gray wolf? Or did we just have some walkabouts?
Nope, that is the Mexican gray wolf. The Mexican wolf is still a gray wolf. It's just a subspecies. So they're still gray wolves. But that population down you see on the New Mexico-Arizona border are what we call the Mexican wolves. I did not put the little blip for the red wolves, which is on the coast of North Carolina. But this is primarily where gray wolves occur. The other population in the lower 48 are those Western Great Lake states. So Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, you're going to have some gray wolves in those areas as well. Now, when it comes to bears, and I'm going to lump brown bears and black bears into this, you see bears are throughout a lot of part of North America. The brown bears are primarily in that northwestern area. They will drop down into that greater Yellowstone, but all those other island pockets of bears and all the eastern half of North America, those are all black bears. But bears can almost be found in all 50 states. I think they're found in 48 states or 47 states. So bears can be fairly widespread. Usually they're isolated to mountain ranges or things like that, but you'll find bears in most of the states in North America. Then you get to the cougars, and thankfully you guys are 1,000 miles away. You're not going to throw anything at me. But when it comes to the cougar range, this is where you find cougars. They are a Western species. This is where they breed and reproduce, and this is where cougars belong. You will see a small isolated pocket of cougars down near the Everglades. There's about 100, how many is it, like 120 or 160? I forget how many.
It's like 160 now, yeah.
Yeah, so there is a population of cougars in Florida. Now, having said that, this range that you see here, this is where they're breeding, reproducing. They are moving eastward, which is a great thing if you love predators and cougars and all the things that we love. And so cougars are becoming more and more commonplace in those Midwestern states. And so states like Arkansas, Missouri, even Iowa, Wisconsin, they're getting more and more confirmed photographs of cougars, but they have yet to document reproduction. If you've followed me for any length of time, I talk about the Tennessee cougar all the time. It was one cougar that wandered through the western part of Tennessee back in 2015. Then there's another really famous cougar that wandered all the way to Connecticut. And so they can travel great distances. The thing is, when you have a large mammal, 150 or 120 to 150 pound mammal on the landscape, especially nowadays, it's going to be photographed. And so hopefully we'll start documenting reproduction in those Midwestern states, and more cougars will show up in some of those Eastern states, but it's probably going to be still going to be a fairly long time. Stephanie, you want to answer Iman's question?
I already did. It's in the chat.
Oh,
I actually answered Adam's too, but hey, while you took a quick break, we had a question from Leah a minute ago, and I promised her that I would get you to confirm. So pick a species, any species. When one of these three species commit to going after a certain prey item, which is most successful?
okay. What if I say that none of them are? Well, I'll pick one of the three, but you have to understand, usually when a predator goes after a prey item, they usually miss it. And so the odds of them capturing the animal is actually lower. So I don't know what the exact percentages are, but for every 10 tries that they make at a prey item, they only may catch it 1 or 2 times. And so it's a rough living. These animals are just trying to survive. I would say, but I wish I had the statistics. I don't know this.
I know. We can definitely look at the statistics.
Yeah, we'll try
I'm
to get
pretty sure
back.
it's the wolf. Oh,
Well, I was going to say there's advantages to both. With the wolf, you have multiple animals that can continue a pursuit, and so
right.
that could lead to higher statistics. Cougars, I know they're not very successful.
No, they're not.
They miss
Right.
way more often than they capture.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's either 1 out of 7 or 1 out of 10 attempts is successful.
Yeah.
And then bears, that one's a tough one because that's not their primary thing. Like actually, you know what, Daryl, we should definitely say bears are most successful because oftentimes grass doesn't run.
That is true. Very, very good point there. But and the thing is, they're opportunity. They only take on that pursuit when it's to their advantage. And so very good question. Now you're gonna. I tell you what, we'll try to answer it on the Facebook page once we find the answer. And I'll take care of posting, Stephanie, if you help me find the answer.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let me finish this. I did mention earlier in the talk coyotes and bobcats, and they will go after some of the smaller prey items. If it's a small deer, obviously fawns or the offspring of some of these prey items. Those things are found all over North America. The one thing I didn't add on here, remember feral dogs, they're found all over North America. And so you just have to know where you are in the country in order to make a really good guess as to what predator took down that animal. And so I won't take the time of going through the chat box, but Stephanie, here, I'll quiz you.
Okay.
Okay, say you find a carcass. What potential predator of the wolf, bear, and cougar? Say you're in the greater Yellowstone area. Which one of those three could it be?
So if I'm in the GYE, it could actually be all 3 of them.
Very, very good.
Actually, it could be all 5 of them, I think, if we go there. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, there.
Well, yeah.
So if I'm there.
Yeah, we don't worry about coyote and bobcat because they're primarily found all over North America. So just wolf, bear, or cougar. So Southern California.
I'm gonna go for cougar is probably most probable.
But what else could it be?
It could also be a wolf.
Nope.
They've started to branch down into California.
There was one. You're gonna pick on me because one made it down there.
Looking for little places.
Cougar and bear definitely. Wolves again, they're just now branching out, so they really haven't established in Southern California.
admittedly, your star was pretty big, so I was thinking in the
It
LA
is.
area, honestly, it was going to be cougars because cougars are, I mean, you've got P22, so I thought that was a gimme. I'm sorry. I wasn't.
Okay, Kansas.
Um, Kansas. So that's a tough one, Daryl. So
It
I'm
is
gonna,
because they're rare.
yeah, all three of these guys are rare. I don't know of any wolf populations in that area.
No.
Cougars, there are some nomadics going through there, and there's a sparse bear population.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
can I
It's
go for people?
well for usually in Kansas, it'll probably be a coyote or a buck.
It's Toto. Yeah,
Okay, how about the Smokies?
it's going to be a black bear, and
Yeah,
only the black bear. Well, I mean, or the meso predators.
yeah. Primarily just the bears. And then when you drop down into the Everglades, you got two of them, which
When we drop into the Everglades, we have the option of cougars or bears,
yes,
black bears
very, very
specifically.
good. So yes. Oh, a last one, northern Wisconsin,
Oh, that one's toughy because it could either be, it could potentially be a cougar or it could be a black bear.
or it could be a
It could be a wolf. Yep.
yep.
Especially around the Great Lakes area.
Yes.
The closer you keep moving that north and east, the more I would go for wolf.
Yeah. So knowing the range of the animals and where you're located, where you're hiking, wherever you're recreating, just kind of know what animals are in that area. And that was a tough quiz for Stephanie because she doesn't know all the animals in those areas, but you probably know the animals in East Tennessee. So okay. Thanks for sticking with me, guys. If you want to learn more about how these animals take down, how these predators take down their prey items, I always encourage you to look up more information. There are some great resources out there. We are always telling you, Stephanie and I are always saying, make sure you're looking at credible resources. So finding someone's blog, unless it's mine, is probably not a good source of information because you want to make sure it's science-based information. So whether or not it's a state or federal agency or a university, but unless you know the person that's producing the information, just take it with a grain of salt. So look up, become more knowledgeable, always maintain that idea of learning as much as you possibly can. So in summary, I'm going to wrap this up. Knowing the attack behavior of predators is really important to potentially identifying what predator took down a prey item. This is class 1 of 2. So knowing that attack behavior is really, really important. The best thing to do is separate it into those 3 categories, whether it's a canid, a felid, or an ursid. Very, very distinct methods of taking down their prey item. And then you can use other things at the scene to narrow that down even further. So looking for tracks or claw marks or bite marks will often tell you. One thing I didn't go into is there's information out there that where you can measure the Stephanie, you can probably talk to it better than I can, where you can measure the width of the canines to help narrow down what type of animal between a bear or
Yeah, you can, it's generally just talking about the ratio. So you can look at the ratio to help determine that. I think the biggest thing that we continually stress, and anybody who listens to our podcast also hears this, in the East, there's always a lot of chatter about cougars that are out there. The biggest difference between people in the East and people in the West is people in the East have lacked exposure to a cougar for a very long time. So size, and Daryl, I know I'm going off track there, but size is, we don't have that perspective anymore unless you're a human who's works closely, and I mean legitimately closely, with cougars.
yes.
If I mean, I don't know if anybody saw my mouth breather as he walked through, but I made it a point on our last episode in our podcast to mention, my dog weighs about as much as a decent sized cougar, and my dog is huge, absolutely huge. He's 160 pounds. So every time we see pictures that people send us, when we keep that kind of context in mind, it definitely helps. But yeah, there are definitely some good resources that are out there to help really kind of disseminate the ratio between animal, they had a house cat, bobcat, cougar, human types of things.
And the one thing that I will stress here is, again, whenever we're teaching you what we're looking for, there is nothing 100%. If you ever meet a biologist that says this is 100% this or that, take them with a grain of salt, because it's always going to be a best guess, because you might have the ratio of what like a bobcat bite would look like, but that ratio might be almost identical to a small cougar at the time. So
Yes.
nothing is, pardon?
Especially when it comes to canids. Canids, I mean, because you've
Yeah.
got the whole domestic, because keep in mind a Chihuahua is a domestic canid and my dog is a domestic canid. And the size difference between both their teeth and the width between their teeth is incredibly different, but they're from the same species. And there's lots of different, you know, every cougar isn't exactly the same age and same size. Those things play into that too. So.
Yeah. And so there's so much to learn, and we always encourage you to learn as much as possible. So the last thing, and I'd save that to the last, know your animal ranges. Don't go for the biggest, scariest animal that you think it could have possibly been, because you're probably going to be wrong. Whenever you're looking, use logic, use information that you have at hand, use the most reasonable guess possible. So you find that carcass and you're living in North Carolina, it's not going to be a grizzly bear, folks. And so just know what animals are likely to be in that area to cause that carcass. So with that, I'm going to thank you. Let me wrap this up, and then I'll stick around for whatever questions. Got to give huge photo credits to the folks that I've used their photos. Visit there. If you can look at this later, look up their name. I highly encourage you to purchase any of the photos that they might have to sell, especially the professional photographers out there. Huge thank you to all those photographers. If this is your first time, obviously we do have a website, wildlifeforyou.com, that Stephanie put together. We've mentioned our podcast a couple of times. By all means, tune into that. I won't steal Stephanie's thunder. She usually promotes the podcast better than I do, but probably the easiest way for you to follow us on Facebook. We're always giving updates on when the next class is, different tidbits of information. When we do find out the answer to that wonderful question that was asked before, we're gonna post it on Facebook, and hopefully Stephanie will remember what that question was.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, mark your calendars, folks. This was part 1 of 2. So 2 weeks from today, we're getting into the second half of this class. Still sticking on predator tactics, but what we're going to focus on in 2 weeks is how those different classes of animals, from the bears to the canines to the felines, how they eat the carcass, how they enjoy the meal. And it's oftentimes very different. And that's where you can begin to look at really that forensic evidence. What trace pieces of evidence are there to tip the scales in one direction or another? And so that'll be a really interesting class. Hopefully the 2 of us will be back for that one. But with that, we teach a lot of classes, and I'm so thankful for you guys to follow us. Remember, when it comes to wildlife, it's your knowledge that often means their existence. I'm not going to say goodnight, folks, because I'm going to answer questions. So
I'm going to say good night, folks. Thank you, guys. I'm going to be out.
Yes. Thank you for watching the chat. Thanks for your color commentary, Joe. And all right, I will stick around to answer whatever questions. If y'all want to run to watch the last of the presidential address, you're welcome to do that. Feel free to send me questions anytime via email, Facebook, Messenger, however you want. But I appreciate you guys so much. Does anyone have any last questions? All right. I am going to bid everyone a wonderful night, and thank you so much for joining us. And I hope to see you in 2 weeks from now. I think you'll learn a whole lot more with that next class. Appreciate it, guys. Really, really do. Hope it wasn't, I didn't want to get gory. We could get gory if you really get into this. You could research a lot of stuff, but this is just basic information to get you moving down the road and determining whether or not you do want to find out more. But all right, guys, you guys have a wonderful night, and I will see you in 2 weeks.